The Tale of the Minister and the Prince. Someone was groaning and crying, wailing the pain of imprisonment and captivity. The king stood up and moved toward the sound, reaching a hall where a large curtain was hanging. The voice was coming from behind the curtain. The king approached and pulled the curtain aside, revealing a young man sitting on a bed. The legs of the bed were up in the air, making it about a meter off the ground. The king greeted the young man with joy. The young man returned the greeting, but did not stand from his place, apologizing for it. The king asked, "Oh, young man, tell me who you are and why you are sad and alone. Also, explain the secret of that pond and the four-colored fish outside this palace." The young man began to cry and put the blanket away from his legs. His body was turned to stone from his chest down to his feet. The king looked at him in astonishment, and the young man said, "I have a strange tale about myself and the fish of this pond. Listen carefully as I describe it. There was once a big city surrounded by 4 islands. My father was the king of the city and the owner of the islands. He ruled for 40 years. After his death, I took his place on the throne, and I had a beautiful cousin whom I married. We lived happily together for 5 years until an incident changed my fate and life forever. One day, my wife prepared to go to the city and told the chef of the palace to prepare dinner for her return. I lay down on the bed, waiting for her to come back so we could eat together. It was a hot day, and 2 of my servants came to fan me. I closed my eyes to take a nap, but I couldn't sleep. The servants thought I had fallen asleep and began to talk quietly. One of them said, "What a pity for this prince who has an unfaithful wife." The other replied, "Indeed, that woman is not worthy of the prince." The first servant asked, "Why doesn't the prince do anything about his wife?" The second replied, "He is unaware of his wife's actions. He doesn't know that she puts sleeping drugs in his water every night, and when he falls asleep, she quietly leaves the palace and returning before he wakes up." Although I heard their conversation, I did not believe it. Soon after, my wife returned from the city. They arranged the table, we had dinner, and chatted together. Then my wife brought 2 glasses of water, one for me and one for herself. When she wasn't looking, I emptied my glass and then pretended that I dropped the water, and I pretended to went to sleep. After a while, I saw her get up and leave the palace, so I quietly got up and followed her without her noticing. We reached the city gate. My wife exited the city, and I followed her. We walked until we arrived at a small mud house. My wife entered the house, and I climbed onto the roof. There was a hole in the roof, and I looked inside. I saw a black man sitting in the house. My wife greeted him. The black man raised his head and shouted, "Why did you come so late?" My wife sweetly replied, "You know I have a husband whom I despise. If it weren't because of him, I would have come much sooner." The black man said, "You're lying. Go away from me." My wife began to plead and cried so much that the black man's heart softened and allowed her to stay. She sat next to him while looking at him with kindness and gratitude. I could no longer bear it. I jumped down from the roof, drew my sword, and entered the house intending to kill both of them with a single blow. However, my sword only struck the neck of the black man, causing him to fall to the ground, and I thought he was dead. I had covered my face with a black cloth, so my wife did not recognize me. I quickly left the house, returned to the palace, and lay down in my place. When morning came and I woke up, I saw my wife with her hair cut short, dressed in black, crying. I asked her what happened. She said, "Last night I received news that my brothers and father went to war against our enemies and were killed. And I am mourning my loved ones." I knew she was lying but did not show it on my face. My wife mourned for a year. She came to me and said, "I still carry the grief of my loved ones in my heart. Allow me to build a room in the palace in their memory and place a tombstone there." I agreed, and soon after, a tomb was built which she named the Mourning Chamber. She went there every day and spent hours inside. I had no idea that the black man had not died from my sword's blow. Instead, he received a deep wound and became dumb. I did not know that my wife had placed him in a wooden box and brought him to the morning chamber. Every day, under the pretense of mourning, she would visit him, bringing him water and food. One day, when my wife went to the morning chamber, I secretly followed her. I stood behind the door and listened as she cried and talked to the black man. I drew my sword and entered the morning chamber, where I saw the black man in the box, and everything became clear to me. I raised my sword to kill my wife. However, she realized that I had injured the black man. She quickly read a spell and blew towards me. At that moment, from my chest down to my feet, I turned to stone. After that, my wife read another spell and said, "Now I have enchanted the city and all its people." At that time, the people of our city were divided into 4 groups. One group was Muslim, another Christian, another Jewish, and the last group was non-believers. With my wife's magic, these 4 groups of people transformed into 4 types of fish of 4 different colors. The city itself turned into a blue pond, and the 4 islands surrounding it became 4 tall mountains. Since then, my wife comes here every day to torture me. After that, she went to visit the dark man in the morning chamber. The prince finished his story with crying. The king, deeply saddened by this tale, said, "Tell me, where is your wife?" The prince replied, "She spends her days in the morning chamber. In the evening, she comes, whips me, and then returns to the black man." The king stood up and said, "By God, I swear I will take revenge for you." With that, he stepped out of the palace. The next day, at sunset, he returned to the palace. He found the morning chamber and entered it. There he saw that lights and candles were light, and the black man was asleep. He drew his sword, killed the man, and threw his body into a well. Then he put on the man's clothes and lay down in his place, leaving the sword by his side. A while later, the woman came to the morning chamber. She brought a glass of drink for the black man. She handed it to the king and said kindly, "I wish you would get better soon and talk to me." The king, lying in place of the black man, replied, "Whatever God wills." The woman, not expecting to hear anything from the black man, let out a scream of joy and fainted. When she regained consciousness, she kissed the ground and said, "Thank God you have spoken." The king, still pretending to be the black man, said, "But I will not speak to you anymore." The woman asked in surprise, "Why not? What sin have I committed?" The king replied, "You have enchanted your husband and whip him every day. His cries and moans have taken sleep away from me and disturbed my peace. If it weren't for his cries, I would have recovered much sooner." The woman said, "If you want, I will break the spell and will no longer torture him." The king replied, "Do it as soon as possible." The woman left the morning chamber and went to the prince. She filled a bowl with water, read a spell over it, blew into it, and then sprinkled the water over the prince from head to toe. The spell was broken, and half of the prince's body returned to its original state. She expelled him from the palace and said, "Leave this place and do not return. Otherwise, you will be killed." Then she returned to the morning chamber and said, "I have done everything you wanted. You will no longer hear his voice. Now talk to me." The king replied in place of the black man, "There is still one thing you have not done." The woman asked in surprise, "What is it?" The king said, "You must break the spell on the city and its people as well, because these 4-colored fish come out of the water every midnight and curse me. If it weren't for their curses, I would have regained my health much sooner." The woman said, "I will do this for you too." She quickly left the morning chamber and went to the pond. She scooped up a handful of water from the pond, read a spell over it, and then sprinkled it over the pond. The spell was broken. The fish turned back into humans. The pond became a city again, and the mountains reverted to islands. The woman returned to the morning chamber and said, "The spell on the city and its people has been broken. You will no longer hear their curses." The king said, "Now come closer to me." The woman approached the king. Suddenly, he grabbed his sword from beside him and attacked her by stabbing her. The woman fell to the ground and died. The king stood up and left the morning chamber. He saw the prince waiting for him outside the palace. He went to him, embraced him, and said, "Thank God you have regained your health. Now answer my question. Will you stay in this city or come with me?" The prince replied, "I will never part from you for the rest of my life." The king said, "Then let us go." The prince said, "Do you know how far it is from here to your city?" The king thought for a moment and said, "It is a 2-day journey." The prince laughed and said, "You are mistaken. It will take a year to reach your city." After that, the king ordered his minister to prepare his troops for a year-long journey. The army was ready, and the king and the prince set off. It took them a year to reach the king's city. The townspeople and the king's army came out to greet them and took them to the palace. The king immediately set to his throne and ordered that the fisherman be brought to the palace. The fisherman came to the palace, and the king rewarded him generously. Thus, the fisherman attained the rank and status that the genie in the jar had promised him, becoming independent of everything and everyone except for God.